Ellis, nice to have you here with us.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. Ellis is Vice President of Environmental Health, Safety, Sustainability, and Business Continuity at Goodyear. You've been a busy man, I'm sure, for the last few months.
Yes, I have.
Ellis is also our WBCSD council member for Goodyear. I met Ellis earlier this year at his Goodyear facility before the travel bans all took place. And I met him as he was coming out of his CEO's office and having just been, I think, given the challenge of looking at your climate goals in a much more ambitious way. And so I'll let you tell the rest of the story, Ellis. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Peter. I know Peter can't be with us, but those were great words from Peter. And in terms of the role corporations play, not only in the words that we use, but the actions that we take, and challenging us to take bolder action. So it was great to hear, and I think that was a great setup for the panel. And as you mentioned, being the leader of environmental health, safety, sustainability, and a great timing on picking up business continuity right before a global pandemic. But I'll talk a little bit about that and how we managed and are managing through the COVID pandemic, and of course the current challenges with racial equity that we're dealing with here in the U.S. But again, thanks for everyone for attending and participating, and looking forward to hearing your questions and comments as we go through. I'm excited to participate with my peers and colleagues from Microsoft and AB InBev today, and I look forward to sharing my perspective on the work that Goodyear has, what we're doing, and how we continue to integrate sustainability, our sustainability, into our corporate strategy. And a lot of work has occurred over the last 3 years. We still have a lot of work to do, but I am very excited about the path forward for our organization. Over the past 3 years, I've been in my role for 3 years, and over the past 3 years, I've learned that the path to what many refer to as an integrated sustainability strategy, where sustainability shifts from kind of being a bolt-on to an organization and a bolt-on of tactics and action plans, to becoming a value system for the organization, in terms of how a business goes to market, how a business engages its stakeholders and meets stakeholders' expectations. And those stakeholders include customers, and investors, key investors, shareholders, of course, employees, and the communities in which we operate. For the most part, it's consistent through many organizations and how you make that transition. The maturity curve usually starts with someone within the organization, and this was true in Goodyear. It usually starts with someone in the organization identifying the need for a greater emphasis on sustainability, and this may come from a personal vision of an individual or a leader in the organization, but this person usually has the influence and the power to put someone in the organization to drive sustainability. And it's usually one person. Sometimes you start with a department, but it's usually one person. And in Goodyear, it was kind of, one person driving this and being responsible for sustainability. But, and I call that person a sustainability hero. There are a lot of different maturity models. We've picked the maturity model to follow, and I'll talk through that. But if the organization doesn't mature past this initial stage, sustainability won't progress, and it won't survive within an organization in a way to have the impact in which Bill and Peter referred to, where you take action and you have bold goals within your organization. You have barriers such as organizational barriers. There are political barriers within your organization, and if you don't gain that mass acceptance within your organization, you're not going to be able to take bold action and have the influence. So I've learned through my experience the power and the importance of influence as we have matured our sustainability efforts within our organization. So for me and my organization, having a systematic process for influencing key stakeholders has been critical to our success as we've been building sustainability maturity in our organization. I'll explain, just take a few minutes to explain it, and many of you may be familiar with this type of maturity model, but that's step one of having that individual contributor or that hero who's responsible for sustainability. The problem is everything flows to that person when there are questions on sustainability, when there are inquiries on sustainability, and that person is seen as sustainability, and it's not integrated into the organization. It's a good start, but again, as I said, if you don't mature past that part, you really don't get to those bold actions. Step two is when the organization starts to see, and we've gone through this, and we're in this phase, and we're moving out of this phase, I think. But when the organization starts to see the value for sustainability, they start to see the pull from customers and key stakeholders and the associates, and they say, you know what, we need to put more resources to sustainability. We need to build more robust strategies and actions on sustainability. The problem is it's still centered in a department, and it's not fully integrated into your function and in your business. And I would say I entered into the organization when we were in this stage, and everything focused around the sustainability department. Again, making progress, maturing, and as an organization, we saw the maturity, but we wanted to continue to mature because we felt in order to fully get the value and create value through sustainability, we had to continue to mature. And I think where we're at today, and where we're the phase that I think is exciting. It's not the last phase. We're continuing to mature through this, but is where our functions kind of take over, and the functions start to see the pull from their stakeholders. They start to see the value in sustainability. They start to really integrate the actions into their actions. They set the goals. The functions start to set the strategies, and that's where you want to be. And your sustainability department now can influence and can offer guidance to those functions as you go through that maturity process. Step four is where, man, it really starts to take off, and we're starting to see this. And this is when Bill was in the organization, I was having some great discussions with our CEO. And you know, you always want that CEO, that senior level, kind of guidance and leadership. And you start get that business leader led, and a lot of your business leaders start to drive sustainability because they see the pull from their customers. They see the value in sustainability, and they start to explore how they can create more value. And then that last step, this is a difficult step for many organizations to take, and I don't know if every organization wants to take this step, is when your brand becomes known as a sustainable brand, and it becomes part of your brand essence. It is fully integrated into your brand, and you really focus on creating value with sustainability through your brand, and it's top of mind for your organization. So as an organization, that's the maturity process we've gone through. I would say we're at that step three, trying to move. We're step two, step three. We actually have elements of step two, step three, and step four, where we have our organization, our sustainability organization. Our functions are taking control of the bold goals and the strategies. We're governing through our functions and have functional leadership on our sustainability governance process. And now we're starting to see our business leaders kind of drive it and ask more questions about the value creation for sustainability. So I think exciting times at Goodyear, challenging times, but very exciting times. That you can be in all phases of maturity, but again, assessing yourself is critical so you can put the actions in place to continue to mature. There are definitely barriers as you go through the process. We saw barriers as we go through the process. I mentioned top down versus bottom up. Who's driving the integration? You definitely want top down and bottom up, and we have elements of both. Your knowledge and literacy around sustainability. So your sustainability organization must take on the role of educating the organization and building that knowledge and literacy. The purpose, what is your company purpose, and do you have purpose, and how does that influence your sustainability actions? And then one thing that really has been driving our maturity is our stakeholder expectations. Our investors, Bill and Peter mentioned the investment community. So our investors, we've seen a much greater engagement from the investors. We've seen them build knowledge and maturity in terms of the questions they ask and the expectations they put on us. So that definitely is driving our maturity as we go through the process. And your communities and your employees, it definitely have a role in driving you to take bolder action. And then there are, I'm not going to fail to mention the political challenges that you have within your organization in terms of just fundamental beliefs and organizational barriers. So all of those things that drive maturity and can cause you to speed up or slow down. So where are we today? The team asked me to talk about where we're at today. So we've developed a framework, sustainability framework that is, I believe, integrated with our functions, and our functions develop goals, develop the strategies, and they drive our actions as we go forward. That framework has 4 pillars. The first is a sustainable materials pillar, and we are focused on managing and sourcing in a way that reduces environmental and social impacts and improves our overall global risk management. Things such as sustainable natural rubber. We have sustainable natural rubber policy that we've implemented a couple of years ago, and we continue to enhance that policy. The use of synthetic rubber. Of course, current synthetic rubber a lot of it is petroleum based, but there are new and emerging technologies that will eliminate the dependency on oil-based feedstock, which will make that a much more viable synthetic rubber when we think about the environment. Soybean oil. This has been a huge success for us in terms of replacing petroleum-based oil with soybean oil, which is greater for the environment. But this is a great example of adding business value and having a sustainable outcome. The performance of the soybean oil has far exceeded the performance of petroleum-based oil, and we've received a lot of product and performance awards with our tires with soybean oil. So that's definitely a goal of ours. So using sustainable materials, critical. Responsible operations, so safeguarding our people, monitoring our environmental impacts, and ensuring product quality, critical for our organization. So top of mind there as the global safety leader is having the safest operations in the world by eliminating all fatalities, serious injuries and fatalities in our organization. So that is so critical for our organization. The last 2, advanced mobility. So we see the onslaught of course, EVs, autonomous vehicles. So advanced mobility is critical to our future strategy and sustainability. And then the last one is inspiring culture. So this is where we talk about our culture promoting ethical behavior, diversity and inclusion, our community involvement, and our talent development, which is critical to the future of our business and continue to build growth in our industry.
Ellis, thank you so much. It's great to. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's great to have your vision and your direction and mapping out those maturity characteristics that you brought us through. So thank you for that. And I do have one comment that I read on Hopin. Such a valuable presentation. So many insights. Thank you, Ellis.
Thank you.
That sums it up. That was from, I don't have the name is already off my screen now, but just thank you for who said that. To get really the panel discussion started, I'm going to invite David Hackett to join Ellis on the stage and to introduce and moderate our next panel discussion. David is partner at Baker McKenzie. Hi, David. And has served as managing director or managing partner in North America and member of the Global Executive Committee. David is also the chair of the North America WBCSD board. Just as a reference point, I know many questions are coming in, and we appreciate that. We'll try to get to your questions now during the broader panel discussion, so we can get a more diversity of thought and response to your questions that you're posing. If you do have a question, please go ahead and post it on the chat section. David, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We're pleased to, thanks, Ellis, for your comments. Also to have on our panel 2 other very distinguished experts in the field, Ezgi Barcenas, who's the Global VP of Sustainability at AB InBev, and she's responsible for their incredibly ambitious 2025 sustainability goals, among other things, as well as Michelle Lancaster, who's the Director of Sustainability Stakeholder Engagement at Microsoft, where Microsoft always seems to be ahead of everyone and has ridiculously expansive objectives for 2030, and we look forward to hearing about that. But I thought maybe we would kick off with, Ellis, you commented on that for many companies, this has been a journey in which the endeavor has been to move from kind of being bolted on to the core of the business. So I thought maybe both Ezgi and Michelle, maybe we'll start with Ezgi, if you could kind of comment on your role, but also talk a little bit about how your program has changed, in terms of the structure, the objectives, and kind of what some of the influences were that have impacted your changes in your program, and in particular, moving it towards being directly related to the company's purpose and strategy. So, Ezgi?
Thank you so much. Thanks, David, and thanks, Ellis, for those inspiring words. A lot of insights in there. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today and to share this dialogue with you. I'm Ezgi Barcenas. I head up the Global Sustainability team at AB InBev. And actually, I'm hearing a background noise, so maybe if everyone can go on mute, maybe better for our audience. So AB InBev is the world's leading brewer with operations in nearly 50 countries and over 400 brands in our portfolio. My team, so I'm based in New York, and my team oversees the development and execution of our sustainability strategy across agricultural development, water stewardship, circular packaging, climate action, and responsible sourcing. With about 40% of our revenue coming from developed countries and 60% from developing countries, we recognize that sustainability plays a big role in fueling growth and innovation, especially in those emerging markets. So over the last few years, our focus has really shifted outside our 4 walls. And I would say a big turning point for that was our merger with SAB, where it gave us access to markets across Africa, India, parts of Central America where we didn't have operations before. So around that time, we moved the sustainability function from corporate affairs into procurement, which really allowed us to work more closely and collaboratively with our supply chain and our operations teams. And it enabled us to set and cascade a shared vision. So as David alluded earlier, we've got our 2025 sustainability goals. I'm not going to cover them right now. You can check them out on our website. I do believe that they're our most ambitious set of goals. They really, the way we designed them is we took that outward in approach to really think about what is our role in society and how are we enabling inclusive growth in everywhere we work. So now we have a very big and diverse team of teams. That's a term that we'd like to call use in our company, a big team of teams that are driving sustainability agenda. So it's not just my team or my peers sitting locally in the zones, in our operating zones, but it's actually our team sitting across procurement roles, operations, logistics, corporate affairs, commercial teams that are driving, helping us drive our sustainability agenda with specific programs, initiatives, and metrics that are then linked to their compensation. So this kind of a structure really enables us to get quick alignment on priorities and resource allocation, and also help us accelerate our efforts. So while some of our efforts in sustainability are heavily focused on supply security and risk management, so when you think about raw material sourcing, whether it's our barley or hop farms that we work with, or how we operate in high stress areas when you think about water and the diminishing resource there, So whether we think about supply security or risk management, we also believe that sustainability does truly drive value and innovation, which is why we recently launched, about 2 years ago, we launched our 100 Plus Accelerator program to close the gaps against our public commitments, but also to be able to identify, pilot, and scale innovative solutions to our shared challenges around the world. So these are some of the changes over the last few years in how we think about sustainability, how we're structured, and how we're trying to drive forward this enormous agenda. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you, Ezgi. Michelle, could you comment on kind of Microsoft's journey and your focus going forward?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. And I really appreciate what both Ellis and Ezgi have already said. It's very familiar, I think, down to some of the phrases that we've been using for a long time, and that shift outside our four walls and teams of teams is definitely my favorite way to get things done. I think both of you also mentioned a bit of what has happened at Microsoft too. I used to joke that at conferences, my favorite cocktail party conversation was, where is your sustainability team located in your organization now, and how many times has it moved in the last 10 years? And no one's been able to get that down to less than one. So that's a challenge for the audience. But Microsoft is not new to sustainability, but I think we've entered a paradigm shift really in the last year of where we set our ambitions. We started with our very first carbon reduction target all the way back in 2009. Our first sort of big sea change was in 2012. And I think that the same thing that happened in 2012 is true in 2020, is that we saw a fundamental shift in our business that required a commensurate shift in the way that we prioritized our sustainability work. In 2012, it was a full-scale shift into the cloud business that we've grown up into today. That meant our carbon emissions from a previously shipped software business went from very small to very large in terms of data center operations. And so in 2012, we decided to set a target to become carbon neutral, which we met that year. We've implemented an internal carbon tax, which we levy against all of our business units, which is a whole different side conversation about how to build teams when you're actually taking money out of their P&L. It works. It works for us anyways. I don't know that it works for everybody, but and through that carbon tax and carbon neutrality really paved the way for a good bit of work. Our renewable energy power purchase agreements now total about 16. The original ones were funded out of that fee. And we've also really seen that fee shift the investment strategy, not just of the company, but of the business units. And I know it may seem strange that groups are actually asking us to raise their tax profile, but that's what we've seen. We have made those funds that are collected out of that tax revenue available for grant dollars back. And so those tax investments create a different kind of incentive for our business units to actually be aware of their carbon emissions, drive them down over time. And some of those behaviors have really persisted even when they've no longer been funded. And then we kind of flipped the script in January, knowing that we needed to do even more. And so in January, we announced our ambition to become carbon negative by 2030. So to get below zero, so from neutral to below zero. And we also expanded the scope of what we were talking about. So carbon neutral for us was across scopes 1, 2, and our business travel. Carbon negative by 2030 includes all 3 scopes. So we have our work cut out for us on really doing more aggressive work in scope 3 in our supply chain. And I would just say that the common thread through all of those has really been, I think, some of the maturity model that Ellis mentioned. I think you can't start at those high ambitions. You really have to create trust and buy-in with some smaller achievable milestones and then level up on the ambition. And I could not echo more just the environment that has changed from a business context that's really enabling people, I think, to make that big ambitious leap. I know Ellis referred to it as moving from a bolt-on to a built-in. We talk about it going from sustainability as a shared value that happened in business conversation into how do we create shared value for our shareholders, both ours and our customers, around sustainability. And I think that pivot into it not just being core to minimizing risk in your business, but really maximizing opportunities, whether that's engagement with your suppliers in AB InBev's case, or being able to be at the forefront of innovating new materials. I think it's that shift of really putting sustainability not just as something that is a risk minimizer, but a opportunity maximizer, if done correctly, is what really powered our shift this last time in 2020.
Thanks for that. I have a question for all three of you, which is, how have the events of the last couple of months, COVID, racial justice, economic decline, have they affected your programs? If so, how? Has it changed issues you need to focus on? Has it affected kind of the balancing of economic short and long-term objectives? Could each of you just comment on whether it's impacted your program and if so, how?
Yeah, I can start. I think for Goodyear, I'll talk COVID first, COVID-19 and our business continuity process. We have a very robust business continuity program and structure within our organization. So it tested our BCPs, our business continuity plans. We had a infectious disease business continuity plan, and it really tested, and it stood up to the test. It also tested our renewed focus several years ago on the safety and health of our associates. It's a goal of ours to have the safest, healthiest operations in the world, and I was excited not to have to, our leaders, when we started going through COVID, our first priority, stated priority, was to protect the safety and health of our associates. So I think as we go through the process, it allowed us to assess our BC planning with it, which is in sustainability, and it stood up and it's standing up to the test. In terms of the racial equity challenges that we're having, this is also testing our views and our thoughts around diversity and inclusion within our inspiring culture structure within sustainability. It has, kind of forced us to take a step back and say, we know what we're saying, and are we taking the bold steps required to make sure there is equity within our company? And I think you have to focus on your company first, then reach out to your community, which we're doing both of those through our programs. But it has, I think, forced us to really take a step back and assess. And I think we'll make some changes, but we're going to listen, we're going to learn, and we're going to make those changes and make those changes based on data and based on what our associates are expecting from us.
Ezgi or Michelle, any comments?
Yeah, so maybe I'll go next. So at ABI, our purpose is to bring people together for a better world, and we mean every word of that, whether it's on the operational side or commercial side. And with operations across 50 countries and hundreds of local communities that we work with around the world, every day we celebrate how diversity makes us stronger as a company, and we learn from each other. There's huge internal benchmarks and best practice sharing that takes place, and that culture of championing diversity is really very real in the company. That said, in recent weeks, we have seen growing inequality has been laid bare, and with the social tensions, and we witnessed really sad events, especially in the U.S. And for many of our colleagues and our communities, this runs very deep and personal. And it's moments like this when we come together as a community, and purpose is really foremost in our minds. And at ABI, we have 10 guiding principles or values, you may call it. It's called our Dream People culture. And one of those is, and I quote, "Our greatest strength is our people." And we try to live by that principle every day. And as Ellis said, the recent events have made us to take a pause and take a step back and think about, how we approach diversity and inclusion as key drivers of success within the company, but also how we make sure that our workforce reflects our consumers and communities. So we're committing to leading the charge for equality and continuing to ramp up efforts there. Regarding COVID, again, the pandemic has caused us all to reevaluate what it means to be together. And we quickly dove into being part of the solution as ABI. So being a global company, we were able to learn very quickly from our colleagues in China as the pandemic made its way westward to Europe, to North America, and then ultimately down to South America. And we felt it in every market where we operated. And along the way, we were able to mobilize our teams to make sure that, to ensure employee health and well-being, but also to procure or produce, masks and face shields and hand sanitizers that we can provide for our first responders, for our employees and communities. So that was one big aspect of our response initiative. Another big piece was on the other end of our value chain, how we helped our retailer partners reopen and navigate the new realities in which they operate today, whether it's through contactless ordering or payment experiences that we now have to offer. We also, through our agricultural development programs, continue to remotely support a big group of our farming communities so that they can get the right agronomic advice and guidance during this time, which is very critical leading into harvest in many parts of the world. So those were some of the examples. Another big one was recycling supply chains and how we've seen, recycling and waste management being dropped as an essential service from, in many markets around the world. And these are incredibly vulnerable communities that were, whose livelihoods were really disrupted. And we work with them to help improve their safety and health and well-being, by providing them with masks, hand sanitizers, and trainings. So those are just some of the examples in how we shifted our focus to response and recovery.
David, if you don't mind, I'd just chime in for a second. I think we have also experienced, I think, similar work challenges at Microsoft. We also are sort of at the forefront of this working from home. So I think as we've looked at this from Microsoft, it's both been a disruption, but also a bit of an opportunity to really rethink about how we deliver and deploy technology and who we deliver it to and what purpose is it serving, which are all questions we've spent a long time thinking about. I love ABI's mission. It's pretty similar to ours, which is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And what our CEO has said repeatedly is that we mean every person. And if we're developing technology solutions that don't help every person achieve more, then we are not meeting our mission. And I think we've actually spent quite a bit of time working a little bit more comprehensively as an ESG team, which we typically focus on the E, and the S is over there and the G is over there. Both the twin events have really pushed, I think, that work more closely together. And I think it's really been beneficial. I think we've developed a pretty common set of principles of really listening and empathy first and foremost, which was, I think, part of what Satya brought to Microsoft 5 years ago. But to really think hard about what we can do as a company, we should really focus in on where we can make the biggest impact and what's really true and authentic to ourselves, which is why I think both with sustainability, our work on resiliency and COVID, and then our recent announcements around what we intend to do and shift our business around addressing systemic racism and racial inequality has always been, what can we do from an operational standpoint? So for COVID, where can we bring more services into organizations that are tremendously disrupted? For racial injustice, where can we actually change our hiring practices and our executive compensation practices? And it's been the same for sustainability on an operational standpoint. Really thinking about what can our technology do in these instances, and what can our capital do? If we have done as a technology company reasonably well during these turbulent times, and we have, I think, both the responsibility and opportunity to use that capital in transformative ways. And that is what we've done. The recent skills announcement to bring basically free job training to 25 million people around the world, which is just the first start. And then our racial justice announcements not too long ago really focused on how do we change our hiring practices, but how do we change our capital? And in this instance, it was really looking hard at our supply chain, which was work we're already doing on the sustainability side, but really making a commitment to double the number of suppliers that are in the Black and African American community, and dedicating $500 $500 million of our supply chain spend going to minority businesses. And we've also thought about how we change the way that we deliver services. So we had long thought about connectivity and philanthropy largely in unserved regions. And we're thinking now about unserved populations rather than a geographical designation. That's really, I think, been helpful for all of us to come together to think about where can we really make the biggest impact as a company, what's true and authentic to Microsoft, and what can we deliver that maybe is not being delivered by other people in the market. So I think we all occupy different niches. I think it's really hard. People want, I think Peter said it really well at the beginning, people want to respond, people need to respond, but I think doing so from that place of really what's your core competency as a company and driving forward with those assets is the thing that makes it sticky, and it needs to be sticky because this is not the last gap in supply chain resiliency or the solution to equality. Right now we're in a time that we all need to continue to learn and grow and adapt.
Thanks for that. And we have a number of kind of interesting questions from the audience, and each of you touched on kind of one of them, and that has to do with supply chains. Do you think the relationships are going to change either in terms of oversight or engagement, or how you select them as a result of recent events and the kind of growing perception of importance of supplier performance related to ESG? If you're going to say, here are one or two things we really think we're going to have to focus on more related to supply chains, what would they be?
Maybe I'll jump in there. So yes, you're right. I think the pandemic is really a stark reminder of the importance of investing in resilience or designing for resilience versus efficiency. And I think we always knew that, but we never realized the very immediate consequences of it should an event like this happen. And I think, so when we think about some of the long-term efforts and long-term collaboration with our supply chain, for us, first and foremost, is how do we continue to create those local, decentralized supply chains? That's really a bigger priority than ever. And it works well because we were already investing heavily in our agricultural and recycling supply chains, but there's definitely room for improvement in terms of collaboration and identifying, potential areas of shared efforts. For example, one big piece that we're now working with our smallholder farmers, as well as some of the other commercial partners in agriculture, whether it's our direct farmers or our indirect supply chain in agriculture, is how we started looking into agriculture and food systems more broadly. I mean, we're a beer company, but we are starting to think about the potential of soil sequestration, regeneration, enhanced biodiversity, and what does that mean in our agricultural programs, and how do we build or design for these so that we can create more resilient communities, but also more resilient supply chain. So I think that's one aspect in terms of a potential that we can look to fulfill. I think another big piece is working with our packaging suppliers, really identifying where the recycling supply chains are non-existent, working with our commercial partners or peers, figuring out how to change consumer norms in terms of recycling or their behavior in recycling or their attitude towards returnable bottles. We still have two-way bottles in many markets around the world. It's the old milkman model. We'd like to think that arguably we're the largest circular economy in the world, and it's a way for us to continue to promote and protect that supply chain. So we have huge opportunities, unique opportunities to continue to partner with our suppliers on some of these initiatives. But I think the ultimate reward will be once we shift the corporate efforts into more consumer-facing brand stories. And I think that's where we can create huge momentum with our consumers and really set those scalable aspirations or inspiring movements within our consumers and communities.
We have, I think, only a couple minutes left. I'd be curious to hear from just each of you to kind of quickly relay what you think some of the key emerging issues are going to be looking ahead. There's a lot of discussion more about health and wellness and obviously racial equity. What do you see? What do each of the three of you see on the horizon as likely areas of increasing importance in the near term in the ESG world?
I'll start. I guess for me, you mentioned health and wellness. I think that's critical, not only in your workforce, but your community. understanding where you operate, the communities in which you operate, and how health and wellness impact not only your employee base, but your customer base. I think that's going to be critical. And I think COVID has surfaced some challenges that we have within our healthcare system, and just the health and wellness of people in general. So I think health and wellness I think it's a top one today, and I think it's going to continue to emerge as a top item that we need to focus more on, starting with our employee base, moving to our communities, and then figuring out what you can do broader. I think, as Michelle said, making sure, your core competencies, what are your core competencies, and how can you impact some of those areas you want to focus on?
Michelle or Ezgi, any closing thoughts about what lies ahead?
Sure. I would just say two things, I think, from our point of view that span all of these topics. One is capacity building. I think it's really at the heart of how you build resiliency. I think a lot of us have thought about resiliency and business continuity, but the way to do that is not, I think, to select which suppliers have done well and reward them. We can certainly do that, but it's really pulling everybody along and upwards. I think the numbers that we see from the IPCC around climate change indicate that if we're not all doing the work, we're not going to get there. And I think that's been made abundantly true in COVID times, and then especially in the re-examination of the stark inequalities that still exist in the United States and in many parts of the world due to racial inequality. And so I really think it's about how do you build communities, how do you build capacity so that everyone has the ability and the access and the opportunity to play a more engaged role in the world, whether that's in environmental settings or elsewhere. And the second one will surprise nobody from Microsoft. We really think data and innovation is the key theme. It is what I think will get us to a vaccine. It is what will help us understand if we're making progress. And it's really at the core of what we do. I think we have incredibly limited time and incredibly limited resources. We've touched on just a few of the topics that companies are struggling to get a better handle on and make progress on. And I think it's not about choosing priorities. It's about really using that data to understand where you can make the biggest impact, and then really driving your capital operations and your community building in those areas to accelerate that work.
Ezgi, any closing comments?
Well, I know we're over time, so I just want to thank everyone for today's discussion and for the thoughtful questions. I think everyone has outlined how the walls of environmental, social, economic sustainability are really coming down, and now is the time for us to really take a multidimensional approach to how we think about measurable impact and that local impact. So thanks again for the opportunity to connect today.
Well said. Thanks to the three of you for sharing your insights. Really interesting. You've stimulated a lot of questions, a lot of phenomenally interesting and complicated questions that we could take up for another hour, I'm sure, about innovation and collaboration with other companies, voluntary versus mandatory approaches. So thanks to all of you for your contributions. And Bill, back to you.
Covered as a panel in 30 minutes is nearly impossible, but you did a really nice job of framing the discussions and making everything quite a bit more clear to those, I think, that were listening. I apologize if I'm having some mic problems, but I think we're working through that. So thank you, Ezgi, Michelle, Ellis, and David. I think you really framed the context of ESG and its challenges to migrating a business forward. Before we go to the break, these virtual events, and I've now done many, this is the first one we've done on the Hopin platform, and I really want to acknowledge three folks that have worked with us in our organization to put this all together. So Madi, can you please bring yourself, Maureen, and Miriam, if they're there, onto the screen? Yeah, well, there's Miriam, everyone. Of course, there's Madi running the show from behind the scenes, and I don't know if we'll have Maureen or not. I think she might not be on the platform at the moment, but Maureen has helped us really with the scripting. This was the team that helped put this together, so I want to thank them all very much from the bottom of my heart, because I know they've put a lot of work into pulling this off. And we'll have a second session coming up, and they'll be working just as hard. We're going to take a short break and be back together at the bottom of the hour.